Hi, this is Matt Ho, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Man, sometimes technology is awesome. Sometimes it slows everything down. It's been a tough week for technology, and it's amazing that you and I can talk across the country, right? I'm on one coast, around the other, and by the slightest little things, and then like the software's like, "Whoa, we don't want to start a show right now, do you?"
Well, I mean, to be fair, it starts with the fact that my personal time management sucks. So that's a big part of the delay here. Is Matt Ho's personal time management is garbage. But
Well, okay, yeah, fair
yeah,
enough.
so like let's put responsibility where it needs to be put. But it is. I mean, it can be difficult, like where uh, the simple things aren't so simple. But the fact, like you said, though, Pete, this what we're doing right here. I mean, a few years ago, we couldn't have done this. 10 years when I first started doing media, 13 years ago now. So at end of 2009, this wasn't even a. This was. I mean, we had Skype, but to do this for like as a kind of a professional journalism, media experience, that wasn't an option.
Right.
And even 5 years ago, doing this was problematic. It wasn't really not until 2 or 3 years ago that we're at the point now where we have this type of interface that works reliably, that you can use it for media. And that's what excites me when people say what gives you hope about change. A lot of it has to do with the technology piece, that we're just now getting to understand the technologies we have, that we don't have to rely on a giant transmitter someplace
Hmm.
beaming out our media, right?
Yeah.
And that you have to go to it because like I said, even before the pandemic, so just talking about 3 years ago, I still had to go to studios to do interviews. Because the Zoom connections and whatever, StreamYard, I don't even know if it was around then 3 years ago. But yeah, I mean, so that's what gives me hope, is this technology that we have that can asymmetrically be used
Mm.
in ways by folks who are not part of the establishment, who aren't part of Time Warner or Disney or
Yeah.
Fox or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And this thing right here that we're doing, this is another evolution of that, because we can, once we get the software figured out and get our schedules all dialed in, we can have a real candid conversation. One of the things that drives me crazy as a member of the media is when you see this opportunity for it, and I'll just pick ABC. You're hosting this debate, and first off, you're clearly partisan, you know, like it's just so terrible. And then the
Yeah.
candidates are so bad at like when they have opportunities to say something special, it's just all performative, And I don't want to see a performance. I want to get to know this person, and in this format, you and I can do that. And I'll say this honestly, I've reached out to other candidates as I've tried to kind of sort out like how I want to do these things, and they're very reluctant to talk openly, candidly, without a bunch of rules ahead of time.
All
You
right.
gave
Oh,
me no rules. You just said,
no.
"Yeah, let's do it."
Yeah, I mean, I know why. I mean, like there is, if people are familiar, ever watched the TV show, the Netflix show, House of Cards, with
Right.
Kevin Spacey and Robin Wright and everything, and he at some point becomes the president, and he's rehearsing for the debates. And there's a painstaking scene. I mean, they did such a great job with this scene where they show him rehearsing for the debates, and it is painstaking. It is frustrating to watch because it's exactly what you're talking about. They are just manufacturing, manipulating, being so deliberative with how he's going to answer every question. And the hyperbole of that really is not to be exaggerated. Like the exaggeration is the exaggeration, because it is so dramatic how people are controlled, how candidates, politicians, pundits, whoever, are so tightly bound by a stricture, a restriction on what they can and can't say.
Right.
We just actually had a conversation on this morning with a guy talking about various different types of voting mechanisms: ranked choice voting, star voting, approval voting, all things that would take us away from this whoever gets a plurality wins kind of thing. So you can win with 31% if you've got enough people in your race, right? But one of the things is this approval voting, where just basically the pitfall of that would be just get as many people to not dislike you as possible, right? And you're not doing anyone a service that way, and that's what we're seeing more and more of. And people don't know who they're being represented by. And then on the other side of it, is the media seems scared to ask the questions to really to because there's so much of it's access journalism. Like, oh my God, if I'm too hard, if I'm too brutish, or if I offend them, they're never going to ask me back. And so.
Well, and you have to be able to be candid, and I think you and I can have a candid conversation, And I guess let me just do this. So I read to your platform, and everybody can go over to Matt's platform right there. You see the link there; it's in the comments as well. Take a look there, and you can go and you can look at how Matt is approaching the problem. And we don't agree on everything, right? And so I don't know that. Look, I don't live in North Carolina, but let's just say that I do. I would have to wrap my head around voting for you because there's certain things where I'm like, that is not the direction I think I want to go, right? But you also don't ever get 100% match on your candidate. So when you look at these things, like I'm going to take some convincing that we need to mess with the voting system, or that we want to spend political capital messing with that, or with the electoral college, and you have a lot of issues that you get into, and I'm not against that because I like that you lay your things out. But I don't know that I can vote for you. I know you're a great dude. I know that I can count on you to work your ass off and be honest and have integrity. I can vote for that. And so you get people in this spot, and I'm firmly in the middle. I don't like the left. I don't like the right, in terms of how they approach policy. But I do like folks on the left and the right, and I lean left on some things and I lean right on others. And, all these things. How do I vote for a guy like you?
Well, I mean, I think it comes down to your principles, your beliefs, what your values are, what you need, what your family needs, what your community needs. Those are all the things that go into factoring who to vote for, who to give that vote to. Ranked choice voting is something I'm in favor of because you're able to list a preference and you're able to weight the candidates. So if there are multiple candidates, this Matt Ho guy is not my first choice, but he would be my second or third choice, and you're able to weight it that way. And this, candidate A is definitely my top choice. Ho's not so bad. I give him number 2, but candidate C, that guy should never be anywhere near elected office. So he's, so I think there are ways we can balance that better than the present system, where again it is a plurality takes all. But the idea of who you vote for, that should not be compromised. And this is one of the problems we have with our current election system, or the way we do, is that voters are going to the ballot box compromising. Right? They're doing this lesser of two evil thing. They're doing like this as if there's some MSNBC or Fox News pundit doing some type of electoral jujitsu to figure out who is the lesser of two evils.
Yeah.
And right. I mean, and the way, in my opinion, is that should not be where the compromise takes place. The compromise takes place at the city council. It takes place at the legislature. It takes place in the Congress. If you're voting for someone who you've already compromised on that person, why do you expect you're going to get anything close to what you need? And so, I'm not offended that you're like, I'm not going to vote for you. Okay, because I know there's, all the different flavors, all the different fish of the sea out there, kind of, right? I mean, like, I understand that. And that's why, when it comes to democracy reform, I want to see more options. I want to see it expanded, become more inclusive. I want to go to proportional representation so that people aren't left out, right? In our current system, one person gets in, and then all the other people who took part in the process are left out, are excluded. So say you have a district that, and because of gerrymandering, we don't really see that this much anymore. Everything's so painted so red and blue in terms of the deliberate programming of the districts we have, right? But, and you do have the case where you can have someone who gets 50.1% of the vote. Well, the 49.9% of the people who didn't vote for that person have no representation. They're just basically shut out now, it seems like. You're right. I mean, so how do you bring more people in? But certainly you saying that you wouldn't vote for me, it doesn't offend me, and it actually refreshes me, because people are afraid to say such things like, I'm going to be offended because you have different beliefs than I do. You have different needs. You have your economic and political philosophies are not the same as mine. And that's why we have a Congress. That's why we have a legislator. That's why we have a city council to hash these things out. That's the essence of democracy, because no, we don't all agree. But we're able to have this conversation. And then get back to the original thing we're talking about, how great this technology is to be able to do this.
Yeah. And when we look at these issues that matter, like is your policy on, I don't know, climate change, right? Is that too much of a hurdle for me to get over, or can I vote for someone that I believe in that person, right? Maybe we
Yeah.
disagree on the path, but we both want to get to a place where we're better stewards of the earth, right? And so, can you be that person? And going back in time a little bit, you talked about, I mean, people always say this, right? Voting for the lesser of two evils. That means voting for evil,
Right.
and it's
Right.
we've
Right.
got to get better access to better choices. And I don't want to get too bound up in like big, stupid left and right politics stuff. But the reality is whoever won the presidential election, the other side was going to be kicking and screaming about how the election was stolen from them. So we're just seeing the version of the right from that. And before that, it was the version of the left. And now there's talk about, as soon as the Republicans take power in the midterms, that they're going to impeach President
Right.
Biden and Kamala Harris. Oh my God. Can we just solve some problems, please? Like let's work together. And like let's say that I get elected senator of California, which is impossible. I can work with a guy like you, right? I can
Right.
work with these other people. But at some point you do need to go home. And so look, I'm not big on term limits, because we can either do that. My currently, this is where I'm at politically. My current political philosophy is vote out all incumbents.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get to a valuation personally of $50 million, $100 million, go home. You won.
Right.
Go do something else. You don't get to be in Congress anymore because you don't connect with people like me. So I'm in effect not represented by anybody. Neither of my senators nor my U.S. representative in any way represent what I think is important. And I, I'm in a state of California where there's a lot of people who are in the middle. We're almost 50-50, middle, Republican, and then the Democrats fill the other silo, right? Almost close enough that if we all aligned, we can defeat whatever happens on the Democrat side. But I'm also not a Republican, and those guys don't want to play ball. And so we get these crazy outcomes where nobody's happy.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Well, the people that are happy are the people that benefit from the status quo. Right.
Yeah,
I mean, so you talk about just the corruption, how can you look at the situation where you have plenty of members of Congress, some of them quite overtly in senior positions, Nancy Pelosi, of course, being the best example, or Mitch McConnell, too, whose wealth has grown exponentially.
Yeah.
Not even in like a linear fashion. Like
Yeah.
It's just grown exponentially over their times in office. And you look and you say, okay, they make how much money? And and then you say, oh no, it's because their husbands or their wives. And give me a break. Right.
Really
Oh no, we never talk about business in the bed, kind of like that. You really, I mean, and then now you get back to like, now you're forcing me to break out the don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining, phrase. Right. I mean, like, because that's what we get over and over again. And there are certainly special interests, that benefit from the status quo that will always get their cut, their share, and meanwhile, majority of the people are not receiving it. And I think that's where, like, if you're the senator for California, I'm the senator from North Carolina, we have that common understanding. We can look at it and say, I mean, it's got to be much worse in California, right? In terms of, but we have 12 opioid overdose deaths a day in North Carolina. 12.
Yeah.
I mean, for a state like California, so that's probably 60 a day out there, right? And so we could get into the room together and say, we need to end this and not have the responsibility, as we see it, to protect big pharma, right? To protect the various interests that are benefiting from the war on drugs, right? Like, I know that you'd be in there, we would not be, well, we got to make sure the for-profit prison system still gets theirs. Right. I mean, I like that kind of thing. We may have wildly different solutions to it, but I think the principles, and this gets back to, and I feel like I may have said this before on your show, because when I was on with
Stu?
With Stu Scheller. Thank you.
Yeah.
With Stu Scheller, this idea that as Jefferson said in his first inaugural, differences of opinion do not imply differences of principle. Right. And I think that's what we have to keep coming back to. And unfortunately, we have a system that doesn't work on principle. It works on, who benefits.
If Pete was president, there are a couple things I would do instantly. I would let everybody in Congress know that I'll be tearing up executive orders 1, 2 a day. I might pick up the pace, but be prepared because it's your guys' job to write law, not my job. Yes, I have the power to do things. Let's make it temporary. So I'm going to start tearing up executive orders. Get ready. You're going to have to do your damn job. And the other thing I would say is don't hand me a bill that isn't bipartisan. And bipartisan, I don't mean, hey, you got one person from the other party. I mean truly bipartisan. If you're going to hand me a bill like that, I'm going to shove it in my pocket, and you're not going to have a chance to get to it. You're welcome to get together to veto me or override my veto, but I'm just going to veto things until these fuckers start getting along. But it's just Congress isn't doing their job, man. They're not declaring wars. They're not funding things that the president funds.
They play these. They both sides play the game where they attach these poison pills to bills that might have nothing to do with what the purpose of the bill is. Right, just to make sure the bill's demise, or to make sure something special gets in that they want, that benefits from them. Of course, I've heard all my life how they're getting rid of pork, and pork hasn't disappeared. No. I mean, like, and then there's just the blatant corruption, the fact that you could have, like, with this Inflation Reduction Act. First of all, I think that you can't have there should be something. I don't know how you would do it, but like, you can't have a bill that doesn't do what the bill says it's going to do, right? So the Inflation Reduction, that's the best example. It's not going to do anything about it. It's the opposite, right? It's just so that type of thing, truth in advertising, I guess. But to have something like that where, I'm very strong on the environmental side and climate side. And so I think the Inflation Reduction Act is a carbon bomb. With the giveaways to the fossil fuel industry. Look, if you're on the climate side, you're being told that this climate bill is really going to help, and then you see that Exxon, BP, Chevron, all their CEOs are in favor of that bill. Come on. Don't again, you're pissing on my leg and telling me it's raining. Like that kind of thing, right? You're back to that again. But you look at that and you see like how Schumer and Manchin get in a closed room, they hammer out a deal, and has all these giveaways to the fossil fuel industry. It's going to be more harmful to the climate than it will be helpful. I think we're going to see that because it's going to expand fossil fuel use. But when you look at it and you look and say for the Mountain Valley Pipeline, which is here in the east, comes through North Carolina, which basically it's going to make sure that Mountain Valley Pipeline goes through. Manchin has gotten millions of dollars from those folks. Schumer has gotten hundreds of thousands of dollars from the folks. So just the over corruption, right? How can that be considered anything other than corruption? That Manchin gets millions from a company, Schumer gets hundreds of thousands from the company. They get together, they put together a deal, and one particular company benefits that way. It's just, how long are we going to allow that to continue? It's been going on, forever, of course, back to the Roman Senate. But that doesn't mean we have to tolerate it.
When we did a charity ride, Scott Husing and we rode across with Save the Brave across the nation. A bunch of us did this, and we stopped in Charleston. And then I turned around and I came back and I towed his not towed, but I carried his motorcycle back in the back of my truck, right? And I thought, I'm not going to take 10 back across. I'm going to get on US 80 and then get off the beaten path a little bit. And let me tell you something, people are hard on the South out here in California. The South is hurting, for whatever reason. There's so I went to Selma, and what struck me in Selma was I wanted to go there. I wanted to see the Edmund Pettus Bridge and all of those things. Yeah. But if not for civil rights tourism, there would really be no industry there. Their military base went away. The farming is not, stout enough to employ enough people. The next town west of Selma didn't have enough people and financial might to put a gas station to work. Right. And so as you drive through these main towns, you see, and I know you've seen this, derelict buildings. People's dreams are just covered in ivy and moss and being pulled down. And this is on the main damn street of town, and all over the place. There was a place I went to sort of by just west of Charleston where there's this beautiful old brick building, and it's just a ruin, and it maybe was someone's dream 80 years ago. It was a theater, and I can't remember the town, but it wasn't the main town, right? It was a town in between main towns. and not on the main highway. And so we look at all of this money that's being spent. So and give me a second here to get there. And so
Yeah.
you look back in time, and I've been reading a lot of Laura Ingalls Wilder's stuff and biographies about her. And one of the things, she was she was a libertarian, but also when all of that New Deal money was flowing out, there's people competing for that money. And if your senator or your representative loses in that battle, you don't get that money, and the road doesn't get made, or you've
Right.
got to use your own state, whatever it is. And these things mattered. And so when you inject this money in, you have all of this competition. I know from being on a walking committee here in California, when you put in your bids for certain contracts to get access to certain grants from the state or from the federal government, you're competing with LA, you're competing with San Diego, you're competing with people that have whole staffs just to do these things. And you're trying to, get the money so you can get your kids to cross the street safely. And what struck me about all that is like, why is that money way up here? Why are we working so hard? Just put it down here at the county level so
Right.
we can put it to work where it needs to be. But that's not how the system works. It's competitive. And when the money doesn't go your way, if we're going to push money from the top down, if the money doesn't go your way, the areas that don't have enough, that are exploding in population and can't get their kids across the street safely, they're the ones that have to work the hardest to try to cover these gaps.
No, that's absolutely right. And it's one of the Green Party planks. Even though we're a socialist organization, it's localized.
Mm.
So you have that type of funding where we're collectively we're putting it in together, but then the local levels are where it's being decided. Like, say that we believe in a federal jobs guarantee. That's not the federal government saying that we're going to assign jobs to people. No, that's just the federal government guaranteeing that local communities have the resources to pay people, to employ people to do the things that local communities need, and those areas are prime example. And we have them. North Carolina, statistically is better, quote unquote, than the other states in the South on a whole host of metrics, particularly when you get down Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Arkansas, parts of Florida, parts of, very destitute. But we have those areas here. Half of our counties have lost population in the last decade. So even as the state increased population by 10%, half our counties lost population. We have 100 counties, 51 or something like that lost population. And you go out in the mountain communities, or you go particularly eastern North Carolina, rural communities near the ocean, near the shore, communities that were once primarily small farms or family-owned farms and small manufacturing. And it's all gone. It's all gone. And, I can go a whole glaze everyone's eyes over, right, with my understanding of why that happened, the financialization policies that take place under Nixon, getting off the gold standard, strong dollar policies, et cetera, why that all happens. And this is why this stuff is important, right? This is why what the Senate does, what the House does is important, because they set the policies that allow for this type of destitution to occur. Because where did that money go to? That money went to the top. It got squeezed. Those communities got squeezed. And so, but you see that, we have a state, half our school kids in North Carolina qualify for a free lunch.
Mm.
And you look at it and you say, how is this sustainable? Right. And
Right.
where are the solutions? And rightfully, you can say, okay, we've had these big, going back to LBJ, going back to FDR, these big nationwide policies, and one argument is that, they haven't been updated, or they've not been, what LBJ did with the Great Society, that was more than almost 60 years ago now, kind of thing. Like, you haven't updated it. Meanwhile, society has evolved. So you can make it in those arguments, but you can also very much look at the argument that, like, is that top-down solution the right approach? And I think, again, as a Green, we want localized solutions. So again, you're going to have a national climate policy, you're going to have a federal jobs guarantee, but that doesn't mean that there are people in rooms in DC deciding what's going to happen in all those little towns that you drove through. But you see that I see that here in North Carolina, again, particularly in eastern North Carolina, and it's dystopian. You're driving through, and it looks like you are in a scene from The Walking Dead or something like that. Things are overgrown. Here's a gas station, and it was, and you have that empathy of, like, this was somebody's dream.
Yeah.
Right. This was somebody, when that person opened that gas station, there wasn't like this idea that the idea was, I'm going to build something here. It's going to be successful. My family is going to be secure. Maybe I can pass it on to my children. Right. And so it is. And we have an encroaching, the destitution is encroaching, and more people are getting in debt. Look, 60% of us are living paycheck to paycheck. The number that really, I think, grabs people is the fact that over half of people making $100,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck. And yeah, there's probably some people who aren't too wise with their money. I'm not very good with my money, but the reality is, as we know, it's not because people are spending poorly. It's because things are too expensive, and the cost of living has far outpaced what wages are. Even for people who have what we consider good middle class jobs, the cost of living has far exceeded that. Yeah.
The most common franchise I saw as I drove along the route, it was Dollar General.
Yeah.
When I saw national level franchises, right, and so that also says a lot to what's available in the economy. And at the Edmund Pettus Bridge, at the foot of the bridge, there is a 94-year-old man who was part of the civil rights movement, and he makes extra money by being this presenter of civil rights and his story, And I'm not saying he's begging, but he's also not begging, right? Like, he's out there and he's doing a historic version of panhandling, right? He's in this position, and I don't understand why we would be in this position. How is it that a 94-year-old man has to stand out in the middle of the damn summer by a bridge in the elements just to try to get a little extra money, and maybe he does it for different reasons, but that's what it looks like to me, because his presentation is something that someone's done themselves, right? And so this is not the country that I think represents, who and what we are, whether you're left or right or in the middle like I am. That's not what I want. I don't want some old dude having to go expose himself to the elements all day to make ends meet.
Right. And what's the danger that comes from that as it worsens? Thomas Paine wrote about this, about England in the late 18th century, right before William Pitt and his terror occurs, right? Very repressive, very brutal. What happens in England in the last part of the 19th century, or the last part of the 18th century, early part of the 19th century. And Paine writes about how, I don't remember the quote, but he talks about children being in the gallows and old people being in work homes. Yeah. Right. And like how unjust that is, like what kind of society we have. And we have that here. That's what we have. Like we were talking about, you've got an old man, 94-year-old man at the foot of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, right, which just puts the whole thing into, I mean, this just dramatizes it. But then too, I mean, you look at our prison system, it's full of children. I mean, maybe not. I mean, like we do have juvenile stuff, but like you look at 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds, those are kids. Like we're at that age where you look back, anyone who's younger than 30 or is a child, basically, right? I mean, like that you refer to them as kids because that's where their lives are, and they're supposed to be moving upwards. And you see that, and where does it go? How's that sustainable? And one of the things we see here is the rent costs and Rent.com just put out a report last week. Rents have gone up 50% in North Carolina over the last year, 50%. Yeah. And there's multiple reasons for that. A lot of it's greed, just because these, sure. But a lot of it too is just the way housing policy has been, but some of it has been like, okay, so when you talk about half of North Carolina counties have lost population in the last 10 years, these rural counties, where did those people go? Right. Yeah. And so that's going to inflate your housing prices. And okay, why do they leave? Well, there's no jobs there anymore. There's no education. There's no resources. A lot of our counties, you got to drive an hour to get to an emergency room. Why are people going to stay in those areas? And if those policies have been deliberate in nature, right, in order to benefit commercial farming or big pharma, big agriculture, or to benefit manufacturing, right? North Carolina used to have all the furniture manufacturing, right? That's pretty much all gone, right? I mean, like those all came about of government policies. Okay, so then the people have to move other places, and you see that. And then what you have on the other side is that our state is giving away billions to industry to come here. And so that brings in more people, because unlike the promises that Apple's going to come and build a facility, it's going to employ all these people, we know that the majority of the people they bring in, they don't hire here, they bring in. So it's more people coming in. And then the fact you look at it and you say, we've got, Pete, we got some crazy, there's a Vietnamese automotive manufacturer that's getting it'll amount to the billions of dollars it's getting. They haven't even built the car yet. They're gonna say they're gonna build here in
Jeez.
North Carolina. Same thing too. There's a company called Boom, right? It's called Boom. People can look this up. Supersonic plane. It's gonna be the next Concorde, right?
Yeah,
It only
I saw
exists on the drawing board, and the state of North Carolina has given them like $500 million. Toyota, which is the biggest, the most profitable car company in the world, getting billions of dollars. Apple is getting $1 billion, and they're the second most. The only company more profitable than Apple is the Saudi King's Oil Company, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's kind of like. And meanwhile, people are experiencing these rent increases. People are experiencing these the inflation. I mean, again, 12 opioid overdose deaths a day. And you say, my God, what are we doing here?
Yeah, it's funny how again, when you add in like the crap politics, it's like we're going to be mad at the petrochemical companies, which, by the way, I've taken to calling organic energy and plant-based energy because it's it's what it is.
Yeah,
and that's just my conversion of being an asshole. But it's like gas companies are gouging me. It's like, well, I know that if I drive east for 2 hours, I'll be in Arizona, and the gas price goes down by $1 plus a gallon. I also know that no one ever gets mad when Apple breaks records on income. They don't go Big Apple. It's like, no, we love Apple. We love Apple. And so you have this bullshit, right? Where, look, you're feeding me a line of bullshit. Okay, are we mad at these petrochemical companies? Sure. Okay. But this is why I mock it. I call it organic energy, because then you're stuck like, oh, it is organic energy. But because it's disingenuous, and we have to figure out how to get some clarity in some of these goals. I want to transition to another plank, and I think we'll be able to talk specifically about this for a while, but I don't want to take the whole show doing it. So let's just try to hold ourselves at 10 minutes if we can.
All right.
Our foreign policy sucks. Our military is, look, I'm glad to do this. If Pete was president, anybody who has a star or more on their collar, if they commanded troops in combat, hey, guess what? You're going to turn your resignation in. You're going to go on to do whatever else it is you're going to do. We don't keep losers on our staff. You got to go.
Pete, if you're let me, I'll gladly administer that policy for you. I'll gladly be on your staff.
And I'm being unfair, but also you and I were there. Liars. Those guys lied. They didn't do what they're supposed to do. It's all about weapon systems. If we took, I don't know, the budget for 50 phalanx systems, which in reality never shoot anything in combat as a system. Like, it's got to be the least shootingest thing of all time. You give me that pile of money, I will build you world-class spies, and we'll have people all over the world doing things, and not, look, that sounds nefarious, not nefarious, but just learning how to do the job.
Right.
Learning how to talk to people and connect people. But because you can't build that on the Gulf Coast, or because you can't build that in Kansas, or because it doesn't take 5,000 people, it takes a limited amount of people to do it, and some budget money to get people to go out across the world, we'll never do it. And what's the modern conflict about? It's about people and interacting with them and the democratization of war, not about the F-45 and the $3 trillion new Navy that we need. I mean, these things are ridiculous. What happens when you sink a $1 trillion ship? It's like, oops, there it goes. You can't just build another one. These things are expensive. So our foreign policy, and I'm not saying being isolationist, but we've got to get better at dealing with our foreign affairs, because we are overcommitting things and breaking our people in the process.
Oh, absolutely, and it's counterproductive. It's what are the benefits? Where are the? I mean, the only benefits seem to go to the weapons companies, to the generals and admirals, right? And then of course to these
losers.
Groups,
let's just call them the losers.
The losers. They benefit. They've got I mean, it's sickening that. And you're right. I'm glad you said that about them. They are liars. They lied for decades, and these were. Many of them were colonels and generals when I joined the Marine Corps in the late 90s, who many of them had fought in Vietnam. And I mean, the sergeants major, the colonels and the generals who, before these wars, the Afghan and Iraq wars, would say things to us when I was a lieutenant about how, I was in Vietnam. We're never going to let that happen again. And then they did it. Right. And it did it twice, not just one, but twice, and then just going along with it, and the lying and I mean, and so that the fact there's been no accountability for that. right? And then how counterproductive the wars have been. I mean, when I talk about who's benefited, you go and you look at, like, say, Al Qaeda, which was anywhere from 200 to 400 people strong across the world on September 11th. That's it. That's how big they were. 200 to 400 people, right? That's it. And look what we did with our war policies. They grew into an organization of tens of thousands of members. I mean, they controlled vast grounds. They controlled entire cities. Half of countries they were in control of. They spawned the Islamic State and everything else. And so it's incredibly counterproductive. And then the immorality of it, getting back to the lying and everything else, as well as the unjust nature of it. But the money making in it is so. Gosh, 14 years ago or so now, I was at the Joint IED Defeat Organization. And I was in charge of a team that was how do we develop technology to identify suicide bombers, and we did a whole lot of tests, and we had all this equipment. We used to go up to Massachusetts and we test all these different scanners and cameras and other things. And we found was that the only two things that could actually find a suicide bomber were either the huge portals that you have in our airports, right? Those imaging portals, or your standard $3,000 metal detector that you have in every courthouse in the United States. And so we said, that this is it. Nothing else really works. And so I remember when I had to go brief our deputy director of the organization on what we found, because we tested 30 or 40 different devices, and this is it. So it's either this $500,000 machine that you have in the airports that you can't put outside, or it's these $3,000 metal detectors. And what he said to me was that you don't get it. There's no way they're ever going to approve $3,000 metal detectors. They don't cost enough. I mean, and this was an SES 2 or 3 saying this, or the civilian equivalent of a 2-star or 3-star general, and you saw that over and over again. That the idea that it has to cost money for it to be something that the system wants. I mean, I know people probably are like, "There's no way it's that crooked," but really it is.
It is 100%. I recall doing a command inventory with someone, and we went on top of this Afghan building. And because I'm always fascinated by this stuff, right? And so there must have been, 25 different cameras up there. And so we're talking, let's just call it $1 million worth of stuff, because it costs money to get it there and everything else.
Yeah.
And most of it was like, not on my property book, not worried about it. Like all of this stuff. But if you
I know that feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you ever gave the Afghans in this case, if you ever gave them a radio in a box, and you said, "Hey, governor, you can talk to your people now and just keep that fucking thing." But no, that's Title IX money. Like, it's a fucking $100,000 radio in a box. This allows this person to commute. We've handed out hand crank radios. We're not going to let the guy who governs this area use this thing because of fucking Title IX money. Where's that rehab going to go? Well, I'll probably go to a DRMO yard. It'll probably get sold for scrap later on, is what we're saying. However, if someone stole that thing, we would never mount an investigation. So all you got to do is go, "Hey, governor, someone stole this thing. I don't know where it is. Don't ever let us see it again." But it's just insane things like this where you're like, just this stupid radio, what's $100,000. We're terrified that it's accounted for in a way that denies the government the ability to communicate with its people. And we know for a fact that that governor, who, by the way, it doesn't matter if they're a good or bad governor, because they're the fucking governor.
Yeah.
If they can communicate with their people, they can stabilize the region. It gives us less to do and creates less risk, right? But we're terrified to do that, and doesn't cost anything. $100,000's nothing. I mean, we'll pay someone to sit behind a desk and never leave the camp $120,000. So that's how much a radio costs.
Well, exactly. Oh my God, I have a radio in a box story. So in 2009, when I was in Afghanistan, they were first putting those in. I'm not sure what iteration you're talking about here, but this was 2009. And I ended up linking up with the contractor and the Afghan guy that they had as kind of like the lead spokesperson for this program. I don't know how they got him, but did it. And he was actually the host of Afghan Idol. So
Right.
like the equivalent of American Idol, this was the host. So like I ended up linking up with these guys. We were supposed to get back to Kabul together from Zabul province in the south, and we ended up having a planes, trains, and automobile experience where it took us like 5 days to get to Kabul. But and we were all over the place, all these different bases trying to get back. And being with this Afghan Idol star, it was kind of funny because it was a celebrity experience for any Afghans we ran into. But the reality was with the radio in a box, for at least what was implemented by us, is that they put the tower up and there was no generator to run it, right? There was no means of broadcasting. There was no material to broadcast, right? So when I say no means of broadcasting, like there was no microphone. There was no way for like to get the system the kind of work to do what you're talking about. The Afghans in that area didn't have radios. So even if you had the fuel to run it, the generator to run it, you had the mechanisms to broadcast, you had right material to use, there was no one to listen to it, like on and on and on. And so I wrote all this up and sent it to the embassy. And what goes back to DC about this program? The radio in a box program is a huge success. It's South, everything else. And there are people who fixed it, people who worked on it and everything else. And they did. But like the idea that like that was what was reported back was what great success it was, as opposed to like, rather than just saying, honestly, okay, phase 1 is done. Okay. But we still need generators, fuel, this, that, the other thing, and it's like that type of lying, that type of deception, that type of always reporting positively, because, oh my God, if we don't report positively, then we may not get our money next year. That's, yeah, it is. I mean, the crookedness of it, and the horror of it all too, is that the slaughter that was occurring all around it, the bloodletting that was occurring all around it. So it wasn't just like this simple grift or some type of fleecing. This was all part of something that was much darker.
And you and I can do this forever. And your examples, you worked in Zabul, I was in Zabul in 2011. Same stupid problems over and over again. Same, and this is why I got good at it. It was like I can see the stupid shit that we do, and if I can just get the military to do less of it and stop. We were in a place where the bazaar wouldn't open. Some general appears out of nowhere, way off the beaten path where we are. He's like, "We're going to build this bazaar." Hey, man, shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about. You're a fucking clown right now. And look at the guy, and I felt bad for him. I'm embarrassed because he has no idea. And it's like you come out. And so, look, if you're that clueless as a general, and generals don't like to be that clueless, and so they never are, then go home. We don't need your help here. Or how many programs like I'm gonna change topics. It's a bunch of bullshit. I hope you get elected. I hope you knock that bullshit off. We can do this all day.
Yeah.
I should say Matt walked out. He said, "I'm fucking leaving the stupid war zone because this is all bullshit," right? So Matt's a man of his word and a man of integrity when it comes to these things.
Well, it took me a while. I mean, what I saw in Afghanistan, you could recognize it because I saw it in Iraq. Right. It was the same nonsense. It was the same bullshit. It was the same, like, again, you're lying. It's not working,
The army people, they were adorable. They'd be like, "Oh, Pete, Afghanistan and Iraq are so different." I'm like, doesn't matter. We're the exact same playbook, same pages of the playbook, same. I'm going to go and focus on us. And that's the only reason why I had any kind of success, and not long-term success, because you can't stop that machine from going. I had a great question.
Just one final point on that. Exactly. So when I resigned from Afghanistan, my position in Afghanistan with the State Department, and then I'm doing all this media, and I would get tripped up by that. People would say, "Well, and I would just go into, oh, okay, well, the terrain's different, the culture's different, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." Talk about like recent history or something, and then finally it dawned on me, like, this is, what am I saying this for? Because it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that we're there. And we're doing the same thing, and the results can be the same.
One of the Pete's rules is we are the cause of instability until someone outside of your organization can prove that you're not. Right. That is the default. Yeah. You won't be able to see it. You won't believe it, but it is absolutely true. Aaron Hook asked a great question a little while ago. He wants to know your stance on nuclear energy. If you want to take care of the earth, and I got to agree with him, if we don't lean on nuclear, then we're really battling thermodynamics. And at some point, those laws, man, they mean something.
You look at some of the work that's being done now. Los Alamos Laboratories just put out a study. There's been other studies that show that in terms of renewables, we have the capacity to use renewables particularly as batteries improve, transmissions improve, that renewables can power our needs. And as we get more efficiency in terms of our use of electricity, nuclear power, you can't just simply shut it down right now. I mean, like I think one of the things, this idea that nuclear as a bridge, I think the costs are extremely high, but the timeline is the issue. To get a nuclear plant up and running, it's 20 to 30 years. And I think the timeline, meanwhile, and then the cost, but meanwhile, you look at stuff on renewables, another that just came out this past month, or I guess last month, the understanding that as the price of renewables has really plummeted, you're talking about getting your money back on your renewable energy infrastructure in 6 years. That the break even point is now 6 years for that. So, I think there's a lot of advantages to aggressively pursuing renewables while continuing interest in nuclear. I mean, and the biggest thing for me about nuclear is the danger of it. Is the danger of it. And the with Chernobyl, with Fukushima, you can see what's happening right now in Ukraine, where these guys are shooting at each other around the power plants. I mean, like they had a thing last week where the main plant there in Ukraine, the nuclear power plant in Europe, had to go to generator power, which is a very dangerous thing. Which is, if you know what happened in Chernobyl, that's the essence of what happens in Chernobyl. Is the plant loses power, the generators are not able to keep up, there's a drop in power, then there's a huge spike, and because of the way that particular reactor was built, when the control rods were reinserted, that causes the explosion. But what it comes back to is this idea of, like, if you lose power and the generators then don't work, you're in a world of you got a world of problems. A meltdown's going to occur, and so that type of thing. And so I wouldn't say no to nuclear. I'd say no nuclear as we know it now, but certainly if we can get to the point where it is safer, where it is something where you don't have the waste, then I'd be happy to consider that. But right now, I'm pretty much anti-nuclear.
I know from talking to a lot of folks, nuclear physicists included, whatever you do is your tool is the thing that you do, right? And so I get it. And you talk to a nuclear physicist, they'll be like, it's safe,
Yeah,
Of course, they're the guys that are always blowing up the things. But yeah, and I think it's reasonable to be open to, like, hey, change my mind. That's fine. Like, let's figure this thing out, because
and I think the problem with nuclear is that, like, it's not a fender bender. Right. It's like, okay, because some of the arguments I've heard, well, it's only really happened twice. 3 Mile Island really didn't count. So it's really just Chernobyl and Fukushima. And so, like, in the course of 75 years, 2 accidents, what's the big deal? Because those are really big deal accidents. That's the problem. It's kind of like why people think plane travel, people are with aviation. Aviation is the safest form of travel, right? But people are terrified of it because when there is an accident, which is rare, it's horrific. 150 people die, right? So meanwhile, we kill what 40,000 people every year on the road, right?
Yeah. Come on, get out of here with your facts and your figures and such. There's a lot of that, right? There's a lot of I've taken a saying like that black box on the wall is full of lies, right?
Yeah.
And here I am talking through a black box, but the reality is that in America, violence isn't a norm. Not like it's reported, and where it is reported, and maybe we could do some damage control and limit it. We're not interested in that. So and that goes back to this climate thing, where look, you got to believe the study. So who knows? But the 15 biggest cargo ships pollute more than all of the cars. All of them.
Right.
And I'm not the only one that says that. There's a dude, James Cobert, who is a professor at the University of Delaware, talks about the look, ships run on bunker oil, which is literally shit you suck out of the ground and dump it in a barrel and then you burn it, right? I mean, you can't have anything dirtier than that. And so in Pete's mind, hey, why don't we manufacture more things here in the U.S.? And
Exactly.
look, you're not going to make people be less consumers, but if we made more of that stuff here, we wouldn't have to ship it across the world, and spend all that energy once you get it to LA, the port of LA, or the Bay Area, and then drive it across I-10 or I-80. I mean, that just seems like, if we want to reduce energy consumption, make that shit here.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, I mean, now you start pulling back the layers of why don't we produce things here, right? And now you get back to, you're going to have to listen to me talk about, Nixon's financialization policies again, right? I mean, like,
Yeah.
but that's part of it, right? I mean, this is why it's important, even though, again, it's boring stuff. Like, it's important to understand what happens, in the sense that, like, after World War II, you have the gold standard, the dollar is tied to the gold standard, and that works until the United States starts having things like the Vietnam War and starts spending all its money on the military. And then now the United States is in debt and can't keep up with their obligations under the gold standard. So we detach the dollar, but now how are you going to fund everything? So you need, on and on and on. And this gets into the dollar being the reserve currency and everything else. But what goes along with that is like this idea of like what you end up having is a strong dollar policy, which really comes into effect in Clinton years, but you see it in the Reagan years and such as well at times. And what that does is that makes it easier. If you're a manufacturer, you're a corporation, you're a bank. Okay, it's cheaper to buy a factory overseas and import that stuff than it is to have the factory here, because the dollar is stronger, imports are cheaper, you can purchase things overseas. I mean, like, that's I'm making it really simplified, but this is how you lose manufacturing in the United States. I mean, a lot of other things go into it, but this is like when I talk about why government policies matter, why it matters that Chuck Schumer and Joe Manchin go into a room together and come out with a deal. This is the type of stuff that's going on for decades, right? And this also then, you see a decrease in wages. Well, how are people going to survive? Well, how are they going to buy these imports? Well, we're going to give them credit, right? And now we have the most in-debt society in the history of the world.
This is why people who make six figures are living paycheck to paycheck.
That's right, and then your point about, so then you have this thing about like the cargo ships, and there's a lot of other things that contribute that never get talked about in the sense of like, where the climate change is coming from. I think the cars get put out there because people in industries see this as a way to make money. We're gonna get everyone to buy a new electric vehicle,
right?
And that's going to solve the problem. It's not going to solve the problem. First of all, your manufacturing of all those cars is going to cause such a carbon explosion anyway. I mean, no one should be buying new cars. That's the answer. Drive less. We should have buses and trains.
My 2014 Ram pickup, which is a V6, and it's 6-cylinder, and it's not a race engine. It's just a straight old 6-cylinder engine. Paid for, and any new car today created cannot beat my carbon footprint on that. I don't care if it's made out of a battery, right? Because of all the resources, because it's not just fuel. All this plastic and everything else. It takes so many resources. Yeah, just buy your car and keep it for 20 years, and you'll use less carbon, because just goddamn laws of thermodynamics,
That's exactly right. The whole idea, you see this with people who are leasing cars. Every 2 or 3 years, they're getting a new car, and it's very profitable for the manufacturers, very profitable for dealerships. And for most people, they're okay with having that car payment every month for the rest of their lives, because that's just what they budget for and they're used to, or whatever they expect. Right. But the reality is that, you're manufacturing that what that's doing in terms of the resources. And when we get into like with these electric vehicles, the damage that they do to the environment because of the mining required for the rare earth materials that have to go into the batteries and all the technology and everything else, that's a whole other issue. The exploitation that, it is. I mean, the simplified nature of our conversations of this, it is what I think is propelling us to our doom, right? And not just in climate, but say on the economy, where again we see more and more people falling behind, struggling, and it just every year it advances in terms of like the number of people that are under that cloud. And and we simplify it and we make it into a red versus blue argument.
Yes.
Right.
And you're right and I'm wrong, or I'm wrong and you're right, and that's it. Binary, right? In the news, obviously, recently there's been this. I'll just call it silly bill or thing that the president's trying to do to impart reduce student debt. I'm not for people being saddled by student debt, but that's several other problems. And the outcome is that these young kids are getting a loan for whatever, $100,000, $250,000, $50,000. They couldn't buy that kind of a car, but they can buy that kind of an education. When in reality, you go spend 4 years, being learning a trade like say pipe fitting, and you'll never want for money again if you're a pipe fitter. Maybe you have to move to a different place. Maybe you gotta move to California where it's fucking beautiful, and you get $70 an hour at a minimum. I mean, that doesn't include all of the other uplifts, the retirement, and so I don't understand. One of the things that drives me crazy, Matt, is when I hear these parents all getting their kids on the path, and God bless, parenting's hard, man. It's hard. But they're like, yeah, my kid decided to go out of state to someone else's in California, by the way, out of state to somebody else's state school. We're so proud of that person. How about you say, no, you go to a California state school, UC, whatever it's going to be. Why are we spending so much money on education? Why is it so hard to get a tenure track job? And then we look at all these things, man, it's crazy. When we look at all of the money that goes into Harvard has a $60+ billion endowment. Why do they charge anybody anything?
I know. The whole, I think that's the whole thing. We argue about the merits of this student loan thing. And there are some good things in it. And, other things that, certainly not what I wanted, but like, in North Carolina, that $10,000. The average student debt in North Carolina is $40,000. So it's going to cover a quarter. That's nothing to sneeze at, right? That is helpful, but it doesn't get to the problem that you're talking about, this creation of the debt. And why do we have this? And why is education so expensive? And why do we have not only an economy, but a culture that tells 17 and 18-year-olds, you have to do this, right? And I think this is where a lot of people who have these loans look around and they say, I grew up, I was told I had to go to college, that it was financially the best thing I could do, but it was also the most responsible thing I could do for myself, on and on and on. And here I am doing a job that doesn't require a college degree. Nothing I learned in school helped me for this. And you see that too. I think graduate school is even worse. All my friends who went to business school, I have a lot of friends who went to business school. I don't know if any of them said like anything was beneficial from their 2 years in business school, other than like the contacts they made, the networking like that, and then getting the piece of paper that says they went to business school. Yeah. I don't know if anyone would say, yeah, no, I really learned something that I use every day, and has really propelled me in my career, and it cost me $100,000 for those 2 years of business school, and you see that. And it gets worse and worse because, how many jobs now you have to apply to, you require not just a BA or BS, but now require an MA or an MS, right? And why is that? Why do we have this culture like that, and who benefits? And certainly my opinion is that education should be available to all at no cost. We pay for it together, everywhere from pre-K. Look, if you want to be an astronaut and you have the qualifications and ability to do it, then you should be able to go to astronaut school, right? And everything in between, but get rid of this nonsense that everybody has to go to college. And hey, look, I'm a huge nerd. My house is covered in books. Like I love learning. I love reading, but if that's what people want to do, but it's not for everybody. And then like you said, the vocations, why do we leave out the vocations and the trades? Why, when we talk about this, it's always about talking about a 4-year education. And, that's not for everybody. It's not what our society needs, and the only people that benefit from it are the Harvards, like with their, they're like they're the pharaohs of Egypt, with their wealth.
Seriously, $60 billion. And you're going to tell me that someone can't manage that money really well? They could, on the interest alone, fund several universities completely.
Yeah, and I'm really proud of my nephew who just started college a couple weeks ago. He's down at UNC Charlotte, and he chose to stay in state, go to a state school. UNC Charlotte's got a great engineering program, and he had the grades. He had the grades and the SAT scores, and all the other things where he could have gone to. He could have gone to a Vanderbilt or Purdue or something like that to, if he wanted to go out of state or go to an engineering school, or whatnot, but no, he chose to, he felt that was the better thing for him. And I'm really proud of him for that decision. It's a great school, UNC Charlotte, and, he's going to make a really good engineer.
All right, let me get in a couple more things, and if you run out of time, let me know. But
Yeah, I've got about 10 more minutes, and I
okay,
have to
so
leave
really
my house.
fast. How are you when you get elected? How are you going to get along with all these assholes and that have been there forever, have all these power networks and everything else? I mean, it's one thing to say I've got all these great ideas,
Yeah.
but it's look. If it was impossible in the Army, it's going to be really hard, or the Marines in your case, it's going to be really hard to enact one of these things.
Yeah, I mean, that's prior for me to be prioritizing certain things. So every year prioritizing one thing, maybe healthcare.
Mhm.
I mean, that's a major concern of mine. I've, like most people, I have people in my life who check their banking account before they go to the doctor,
Right.
and people are dying because of that. And yeah, as I say, like they're not getting their $15 billion aircraft carriers until our people get health care. And I'm not going there to make friends. If I wanted to be part of that system, I would have stayed in it. You
How
know,
many invisible multi-billion-dollar jets do we need?
I know, and that's not again, that's not exaggeration. That the B-21, man, it's going to cost $2 billion a plane.
Yeah,
$2 billion for a plane. I mean, like, and so
and
you
it's
can take.
invisible.
Yeah, and so doing the things that like you see where you can learn from these guys, even as awful as they are, the Mansions, the McConnells,
Mhm.
you can learn from them. And if Manchin and Cinema can just buy on their own because they want to benefit their fossil fuel friends, or in Cinema's case, benefit her hedge fund friends, right? Can ruin the presidency, basically destroy the president's agenda single-handedly, then I think someone as an outsider who's committed to being an outsider, who's committed to being a disruptor,
Yeah.
uh, can do that as well. And if I wanted to go along and get along, I would have run as a Democrat. I would have run as a progressive Democrat, but I have no interest in doing that. I want to be a disruptor. I want to cause the that good trouble,
Yeah.
that creative disruption, that positive disruption, and then using it as a soapbox to influence others. As well as there's other things too, is that you get a guy like me elected, people start saying, well, okay, we really need to look into getting back to like election reform, ranked choice voting, proportional
Oh,
representation, things to kind of,
yeah.
and then maybe we get a guy like you in California elected, I mean, different politics, but you're
Yeah.
going there on principle,
Yeah. Yeah. Principle, right?
yeah.
If I get elected, if I ever ran, I'm working 12 to 16 hours a day every day. I'm going to do ride along so anybody from my district can come along and see what I do every day. I
Right.
mean, get people involved in this. Like, this is what it takes to do this. And I'm glad to quit. You guys don't want me here? You don't got to ask twice. I will go home.
Yeah.
It's like
Uh, right. That's exactly right.
but yeah, man, it's crazy with all of the distractions that we have and the things that don't involve solving problems. We're also a bunch of assholes in this country, right? It's like if you said, hey, we're going to create a state-of-the-art medical program where everybody's going to be taken care of, everybody has to give up what they've got, nobody's going to do it. Nobody's going to do it to get something that's demonstratively better. We can't stand each other long enough to get something that's better, and so we kind of deserve this.
And like you think you're joking, but you're not. I mean, I've
Yeah.
seen polls that have shown that where like people in one hurricane zone, it's usually racial too,
Uh,
but like in one hurricane zone would say they would rather not get hurricane relief if it meant somebody else was also going to get hurricane relief. I mean, just like this, we're going to cut off our nose to spite our face kind of
yeah.
thing. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, like you said with the healthcare thing, like it's objectively you can't argue against it.
Yeah.
But we're not going to do it. I mean, it's the same with like, say, marijuana legalization and like, narcotics decriminalization. Like the evidence is just overwhelming, and it's just, well, we're not going to do it. I mean, that's how here in North Carolina. We don't have any type of marijuana legalization because they just don't want to do it.
One final challenge, and I'll let you go after that. We have a problem with fentanyl getting into our country, and we have a
Hmm.
porous southern border. I am not against immigrants, but I am against China and Mexico working against our well-being and bringing this scourge into our country, which is absolutely impacting our life expectancy at this point. Now it kills so many people.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And the same thing too with trafficking. I'm not like Tucker Carlson. Like trafficking is not like, but trafficking is real. People's lives are damaged, destroyed. People die. It's a real thing. And so you have to have border controls. You have to. I mean, but I'm for open immigration. I'm for a pathway to citizenship in the same way too. I'm not against immigrants. I'm for my grandparents were immigrants. Right. So my thing is, what I think what's happened though is that our border policy, which I define as a crime against humanity, because if any other nation was doing this, we would describe it that way. It has been geared towards keeping people out as opposed to keeping things out or keeping right. I mean, so, you look at that with the fentanyl and everything else. I mean, then you get back into the war on drugs things. I think it's a demand issue, right? And until we take care of that demand issue, nothing we're going to do is going to, it's a prohibition issue. Nothing is going to matter. But I understand that. And so that's why I don't say abolish ICE, because you still need that type of border control. But certainly in terms of where I am in terms of immigration, I am for open immigration with pathways to citizenship, and I think, and there's a reason for that because, my family history and everything, but also too, like when you start talking about things like we talk about, like the Green New Deal and the idea of putting those trillions of dollars to rebuild the country, this massive infrastructure renewal, basically changing the economy, you're going to need that labor. You're going to need, and you could put they're not going to be taking jobs. They don't take the job. I mean, they do the jobs that Americans don't want to do. That's always been the thing about immigrants, right? So, I mean, that I think if we have, this is why I think a lot of what we talk about in my platform, the Green Party platform, it all intersects. It's all tied together. And if you're going to have a Green New Deal, it's going to bring about millions of jobs. You're going to need immigration. The other thing too on immigration though, is that why are people fleeing their homes? What's happening there that is causing them to have to leave? A lot of them are leaving because of the American dream. But a lot of them are leaving because life is brutal and dangerous where they're coming from. And why is that? Well, it goes back to our foreign policy, right? It gets back to our war on drugs. I mean, how many governments in, the DEA has a special diplomatic office that deals with various world leaders who are our friends, who are also drug lords. And right. I mean, like whether it be in Colombia, whether it have been Panama, what's happened in Honduras with Hernandez, I mean, like, and we know this, we know that these leaders are actually the drug lords, and we go along with it. We did in Afghanistan, I mean, like the president's half brother, biggest drug lord in Afghanistan, if not in the world, I mean, like, I mean, like, so, Ahmed Wali Karzai, if you don't know that story, look it up, and that's the way it was, I mean, so I've seen enough of the BS to know that, like, we can do things to dramatically affect things like immigration just by not coddling drug lords in certain countries.
Yeah. So his name's Matt Ho. He's running for senator in North Carolina. You guys can definitely, if you're in North Carolina, you should consider voting for him. And there's the link to go to his website, mattho4senate.org, and you can do all that. Anything in closing, Matt, before I let you go?
No, I appreciate it, Peter. Enjoy the conversation. Hope to do it again with you soon. Hope to continue talking to you. If people want to support my campaign, I'd be really appreciative. MatthewHoferSenate.org, but also to support people like Pete, because like we were saying early on, this technology, what Pete's doing, this is the game changer. This really is. I get into my leftist politics and everything, and I believe a political party shouldn't exist for itself. It's part of a larger body that involves labor organizing, direct action, community aid, communication, all those types of things, right? And but the key piece is that communication piece. That's what everything revolves around. And, if we have this technology, we have people who are willing to have these conversations, lead these conversations, lead this type of media. That's what we need, because that's how we get past that red, blue, MSNBC, Fox News catastrophe that's happening to us. Yeah. So please support people like Pete as well, because this is really a game changer. We don't even know what we're dealing with here, I think, in terms of the technology. Like, I think 10 years from now, we'll come back. We could do this again, talk about and be interesting to see how much changed in our country,
Yeah.
as long as it doesn't get co-opted. And that's what we have to be very vigilant of, because
they're already trying.
They already are. They already are.
Support Pete. He's right. It's a good idea. All right. Stand by for 1 second.